tonight we're stepping into the dim, flickering hallways of a 14th century manor, where the candlelight plays tricks on the walls, the bread could break a tooth, and your future as a nobleman's daughter is already being quietly debated in hushed tones. You're 13 years old, not waking up to a phone alarm, but to the groan of old shutters swinging open and the jolt of cold stone under your bare toes. 13, which, deep breath, is pretty much prime matchmaking season. Your family isn't daydreaming about your happiness, they're calculating your usefulness. Your father is pacing the solar like a storm cloud, deep in thought, while your mother is already revisiting the spring's family marriages like it's some elaborate game board. You're just trying to smooth your hair with a bone-handled comb and act like you haven't guessed exactly what's going on. But let's be honest, you have. You know something is coming, something heavy. Before we dig any deeper, go ahead and like the video and hit that subscribe button. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I make. And hey, if you're listening from somewhere offbeat or curled up in bed, drop your city and your local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're all tuning in from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe put a fan on for that cozy hum. Let's slide gently into tonight's story. You make your way through the chilly manor corridors. Your shoes, if you can call cloth tied to your feet, shoes, slap softly on the stones. Your breath puffs in the air. Outside, the servants are already hard at it, shoveling manure from the stables and sharpening blades at the grindstone. It's muddy, noisy, and none too friendly to your white linen sleeves. But none of that concerns your parents. What matters to them is that you've officially become marketable. Everything about you now, your family name, your etiquette, even the smoothness of your elbows, yes, that's a real thing, is being quietly tallied up in the grand marriage ledger. You're no longer just a daughter, you're an asset, a potential alliance, a way to strengthen the family line, or push some inconvenient cousin one rung further from inheritance. Your mother keeps stitching away, maybe a swan, maybe a very misshapen goose, while giving you that look that says more than any question could. Have you been modest? Have you spoken too freely with the stable hand? Have you done anything at all, that might nudge the negotiation off track? There's still debate among historians. How aware were noble daughters what was being planned for them? Some believe the girls were carefully groomed for their role, coaxed into believing it was all part of a noble tradition. Others argue the girls were kept in the dark, till it was all signed, sealed and settled. Most likely it varied. Depends on the family, the region, the ambition level of your parents. Through the wooden slats of your window, birds are chirping like nothing's wrong while your father meets with a man who arrived under cover of night. Could be a steward carrying news and coin from someone richer. His coin pouch gives a satisfying jingle, always a promising sound. Inside, your younger brother is learning Latin verbs and how to sit like someone important. You're learning quiet obedience and the proper way to serve a cup of wine. Your tutor, who may have once been a nun, now tutors you in humility, measured speech, and how not to look directly at anyone too important. You nod, smile, rehearse your bow, and all the while, somewhere in the back of your mind, you wonder what your future husband smells like. Hopefully not of livestock. And yet, there's comfort in the structure. Everyone knows their part. Even you. But that doesn't mean you don't occasionally drift into daydreams. Dreams that stretch beyond the walls of this manor. Maybe you imagine marrying someone for love. Or maybe, more daringly, not marrying at all. Maybe you fantasize about being one of those women who reads forbidden books and lives alone in an attic full of ink stains and odd plants. That dream feels very far away right now, because today You're being called downstairs. You're expected to serve cider without spilling a drop. The guest is still here. And crucially, he doesn't look at you. That's a good thing. Because in this strange social economy, the less you're noticed, the better your chances. And then there's your mother, an expert in the art of valuing your smile in acres. Literally, some noble families even kept detailed ledgers tracking all of this. Dories, bloodlines, potential political gains. It was like one massive matchmaking spreadsheet, only made of parchment, cluttered with ink blotches, and tragically lacking pivot tables. Somewhere in the hearth, a roast simmers, and your stomach growls. Is it hunger? Or dread? Hard to say. The guest eventually takes his leave. Your father says nothing. Your mother, however, looks quietly pleased. And for some reason, that's even more unsettling. You murmur an excuse and slip out into the garden. Frost crunches under your shoes as you wander past bare shrubs and the lingering bones of summer herbs. Past the hedge maze of looming adulthood lies a choice, one you won't actually get to make. But for now, you stand still, breathing in cold air and crushed rosemary, and you wonder if you'd been born a peasant, would it really be worse? Some would argue yes. Better food here, warmer bedding, and lacework instead of manure. But others say it's just captivity dressed up in velvet. A life of smiling quietly and never quite owning your future. Scholars still debate whether girls in your position truly accepted this fate or quietly pushed back. Maybe they read forbidden love stories in secret. Maybe they hummed crude tavern tunes when no one was listening. You reach down, pluck a half, dead flower, and smile faintly to yourself. One day, someone will ask for your hand. But they won't be asking for you. They'll be asking for your surname, your lineage, your estate potential. And you. You'll nod politely, offer the cider, and pretend this all makes perfect sense. Later that afternoon, you're back in the solar, perched on a stool while your mother opens a cedar chest with an air of slow, theatrical ceremony. Inside, wrapped in linen sachets, are fine fabrics, some imported from Italy, others woven by local guilds. A few delicate pins glint in the firelight. These, she tells you, are part of your dowry. You blink dutifully, trying to seem odd. But mostly you're just wondering why anyone would swap actual land for you and a roll of itchy blue cloth. Your dowry isn't a present. It's your passport into another household, another life. The quality of that life depends on how good the dowry is. A generous one might land you in a manor with glazed windows and 2 pairs of shoes. A modest one, well, hope you like cold floors and shared bathwater. Your father sits opposite, unrolling a scroll filled with figures and scribbled annotations. Grain yields, goat pastures, an uncomfortably specific inventory of silverware labelled medium quality. Romance, clearly, is not the point here. Historians note that dowries were rarely just bags of coins. They could include livestock, seasonal labour promises, or, in one rather colourful case, a prized hunting falcon. Imagine being exchanged for a bird with more status and sharper instincts than you. But at the end of the day, what really matters is balance. Marriages weren't built on love. They were measured trades of status and future leverage. A strong dowry could elevate you to a better station. A weaker one might be part of a long-term family gambit, trading short-term prestige for political alliances and favours that haven't hatched yet. Sometimes dowries came with quirky clauses. Maybe you'd be guaranteed a goose of your own. Maybe you'd get 1 bath per week, regardless of your husband's preferences. The catch: those promises only held weight if your new in-laws chose to honour them. And let's be honest, most didn't. Your mother unfurls a gold, threaded girdle and places it across your lap. It's ornate, lovely, and surprisingly heavy. You ask if you can wear it now. She smiles distantly and says, "No, darling." It's for your wedding chest. Speaking of which, the chest itself is part of the dowry too. It's being carved downstairs right now by a carpenter with 3 fingers and a grudge against symmetry. Some girls get horses. You get a splinter-prone storage box and a future full of polite nodding. Your gaze drifts to the polished silver com in the corner, its surface shining like a mirror. And for just a second, you wonder how much even that is worth, not in coin, but in expectation. That silver com? Yeah, that might be part of your dowry too, because nothing whispers everlasting marital joy like a gently used grooming accessory. And not every noble family played it straight. If funds were tight, they'd dress you up in borrowed silk and act like their vineyard hadn't been a frozen graveyard for the last 3 winters. In some cases, entire debts were disguised, or dowry terms were quietly rewritten after vows were exchanged. Was it deliberate deception, or just desperate manoeuvring in a system too unforgiving for total honesty? Historians are still debating. There's a case from Florence, an infamous one, where a bride's dowry included a vineyard that turned out to be underwater each spring. Another girl was supposedly bringing 7 milk cows into her marriage. It turned out to be 1 actual cow and 6 lovingly illustrated cow sketches. Fingers crossed your parents don't get quite that creative. But the real conflict here isn't between you and some imagined husband. It's between what people expect from you and how much say you actually have in any of it. You're not exactly being sold off. But let's not pretend you're in control, either. The dowry is supposed to represent your family's faith in your future. But it also defines your function, your rank, your transaction value. You run your finger along the edge of a folded tunic. It smells faintly of cedar. You wonder what your future husband's home will smell like. Probably damp wool and livestock. From downstairs you hear someone stoking the fire. A scullery maid giggles, and for a moment you envy her. She doesn't need to worry if she's worth a crate of dried figs or a modest sack of barley. Later, you overhear your father rehearsing lines, practicing how to pitch you to someone else's family. She's obedient. She sings, he mutters. A quick-wit. Maybe too quick. He pauses. Knows how to make pottage and doesn't complain. You weren't meant to hear that, but you do. And now, quietly, you add pottage endurance to your mental skill set. Fathers, historians say, often talked up their daughters' homemaking talents, just like they hyped up their sons' swordplay or falconry skills. In this world, perception is power. A literate girl might get passed over for one who churns butter with just the right amount of docility. It all depends on what the groom's family finds valuable. There's a moment of stillness as your mother gently folds the gold, threaded girdle back into the chest. She pats your hand. You don't talk feelings. No one in this house really does. But that gesture is her way of saying, we're doing what we can. You glance around the solar wooden saints on the shelf, beeswax candles flickering in the draught, rushes underfoot crunching like dry leaves. This house, with all its quirks, is your whole world, and soon you'll leave it for another home that smells different, sounds different, one where every corner feels strange. And honestly, that feels more frightening than the marriage itself. Outside, a raven caws. You smile. Maybe it's an omen. Or maybe it just caught a whiff of the stew. Either way, you head to bed early. Tonight, you'll dream of cows, real ones. And maybe of a man who knows how to smile without weighing your worth in silver spoons and property lines. In the days that follow, everything takes on a new texture. There are unspoken glances between your parents, half-finished sentences, and the unmistakable aroma of roasted pheasant, usually reserved for guests or quiet negotiations. No one's told you anything directly, but come on, you're not oblivious. You notice the signs. Your best chemist is airing out by the fire. Your shoes are getting re-stitched. Your mother keeps reminding you to clean under your nails. Maybe that last part is unrelated, but maybe it's not. In this house, even the smallest instruction might be a breadcrumb. This is when the real game begins. Your parents stop being just your caretakers. They become tacticians. The goal, not just to get you married, but to pull the entire family one notch higher up the social ladder. Carefully, quietly. Imagine your family tree as an actual tree, gnarled, moss-covered, always a little too close to falling. Your father wants to graft you onto a sturdier branch, and for that, he needs to convince another family that you... Yes, you with the ink-stained fingers and lopsided embroidery are the prize. Scholars still argue over how much input girls like you actually had. In the upper crust of society, you might be consulted briefly before being directed. But in the rising merchant class or among lower gentry, marriage was business. Brutally strategic business. And you were the deal on the table. Affection is lovely, but in the end, it's dowries and family alliances that seal the deal. One morning, your mother pulls you aside and drops a name. A local family with an estate, so big it takes 2 days just to walk the boundary. You've heard of them. They're loud, rich and appropriately dull. Their second son, age 16, is said to have only lost 2 fingers in a hunting mishap. So far, so good. You ask the obvious, is he good looking? Your mother promptly changes the subject. That's your answer. In the medieval matchmaking game, physical appearance ranked behind property value. But let's not pretend it didn't matter at all. A bride's looks were tied to fertility myths, household harmony, and the idea that beauty inspired male loyalty. And what counted as beautiful in 1300? Pale skin, straight teeth, wide hips. No outspoken opinions. At the moment, you're clocking in at about a 3 out of 5, depending on who's been paying attention at supper. Still, your looks won't make or break the deal. Your demeanour, that might. Do you carry yourself with elegance? Can you pour wine without a splash? Recite Latin prayers while curtsying at the correct angle. All of these are small tests, invisible to you, but carefully watched, and everyone counts. Behind the scenes, your parents are playing social chess. Marriage isn't about emotion, it's strategy. They're looking to align with families of equal or slightly better standing. Reputations must be clean, fortunes respectable, and most importantly, no recent brushes with heresy or plague. Believe it or not, medieval matchmaking had its own gossip economy. A girl from a scandal-stained household might be socially radioactive, no matter how generous her dowry, and a boy known for dice games and tavern debts. He might find negotiations mysteriously stalling. You remember your cousin Matilda. 3 summers ago, she ran off with the falconer. Now she's got 2 children, lives by the sea, in what might generously be called a shack. And her husband smells like onions on a warm day. Your mother brings her up more than she brings up the Virgin Mary. Takeaway, never elope with someone who smells like feathers and regret. It's not just the men out scouting, either. Your father makes grain visits to the neighbours, which is polite code for matchmaking reconnaissance. He returns with cheese, wine, stained scrolls, and a vague comment about a family with excellent sheep. Meanwhile, the women at home have their own methods. Your aunt swings by with rumours about a young man who allegedly recites poetry without foaming at the mouth. Your tutor hands you a slim volume of love poems, then snatches it back, declaring it too provocative. Your grandmother remains entirely unfazed by all of it. She married at 15, wore a veil made of wool, and didn't see her husband's face until the 3rd day. You ask what she thought of him. She shrugs. He had teeth. Apparently, that was enough. One afternoon, you're asked to help arrange flowers in the Great Hall, not for beauty, This is stagecraft. The hall is being curated. Servants wear their good tunics. Silver is polished to a mirror shine. This isn't a spontaneous day. It's a production. And right on cue, a guest arrives. Not the potential suitor himself. This is an uncle or maybe a steward. He shares wine with your father. Meanwhile, your mother sends you in with a basket of apples, pretending it's all perfectly natural. You're meant to stroll through the hall like it's just another day in your delicately choreographed life. You walk carefully, shoulders straight, feet light, eyes modest. You don't speak. You don't stumble. You feel their gaze. It isn't about affection. It's about evaluation, alliance potential, presentation value. You're not being courted. You're being reviewed. Historians still wrestle with what this all meant for girls like you. Some see it as a form of subtle diplomacy, graceful, strategic, even empowering in a constrained kind of way. Others compare it to livestock displays with better lighting. Either way, you're learning the script, playing your part. The visitor leaves with a thoughtful nod. Nothing's confirmed. But your mother's mood shifts. As she dices leeks for the evening stew, she starts to hum. And in this house, that's the closest thing to optimism you're going to get. You go to bed with your hair neatly braided, just in case tomorrow turns out to be important. That night, you dream of unfamiliar names, lush gardens, and places that don't exist on any map you've ever seen. Somewhere out there, the boy who might become your husband is probably asleep too. Or maybe he's tossing dice in a tavern, oblivious to the fact that his potential bride spent the evening arranging buttercups by candlelight to impress his uncle. The following days blur into a quiet storm of subtle preparations and carefully curated moments. You're asked to help with chores, but only the kinds that make you visible, shelling peas within sight of the gatehouse, scattering feed for the chickens just as visitors arrive, sitting by a window with your needlework perfectly displayed, your fingers moving like clockwork. Your family is staging a presentation, but instead of showcasing bread or wares, it's you being offered up as this season's most promising alliance. But then, something shifts. The usual rhythm is interrupted by the sound of hooves, the creak of leather saddles, and polite greetings drifting in through the open windows. You peek through the lattice and catch a glimpse. A young man dismounting. He's taller than you imagined, slightly clumsy with the reins, and wearing a cloak far too elegant for travel. That could be a sign of wealth or inexperience. Either way, your heart stutters a bit, or maybe it just trips over itself. He doesn't glance up. Instead, he busies himself with dusting his boots like they personally offended him. Historians still puzzle over what those early encounters were really like. Were they formal interviews, casual family banquets, awkward, candlelit silences? You're about to find out. Because yes, he's here to meet you. Well, technically he's here to meet your household. But everyone knows what that really means. His family is giving your proposal serious consideration. Your mother rushes you into your best gown. Conservative neckline, sleeves to the wrist, hem cleaned of stray garden bits. No perfume, but she lets you dab your wrists with rosemary. Just enough to hint at subtle refinement and herb access. Downstairs, the great hall is already staged. Despite the warm day, a fire is crackling. Dishes have been laid out with strategic generosity, and you're reminded one final time what topics are strictly off limits. No pigs. No mention of Matilda's little runaway romance. And for heaven's sake, don't talk about your bird bone collection. He enters with his steward, bows stiffly to your father, and scans the room like he's mentally cataloguing exits. You sympathize. When you're introduced, you offer a graceful curtsy. Eyes low at just the right amount to signal modesty without looking possessed. You've practiced this moment. You've nailed it. The steward and your father launch into small talk. Grapes, rainfall, land boundaries. The young man, really, you should stop calling him. The boy sits beside you on a carved bench. A servant appears with wine. You both accept, both sip. He clears his throat. Do you like music? He asks. A question. Possibly dangerous. If you say yes, maybe he starts singing. If you say no, he might decide you're dull. You smile slightly and reply, sometimes. Safe answer. He nods. You both study the tapestry across the room, saying, Margaret heroically plunging a spear into a dragon's eye. Perfect. This, by the way, is courtship. Or the closest approximation allowed in the 14th century. Romance before marriage is brief, supervised, and smothered in family oversight. You're never really alone. And when you are, it's for 5 minutes under a pear tree while a servant pretends to nap within earshot. Still, those 5 minutes can shape everything. Be too cold and the match might dissolve. Too enthusiastic. You risk seeming improper. It's a balancing act worthy of its own heraldry. You take another sip of wine. He notices your embroidery hoop. What are you working on? He asks. You show him. It's a fox mid, pounced. He actually smiles this time. Looks like it's about to jump right off the fabric. It's a simple comment. But somehow it lingers. The steward announces it's time for them to leave. Your mother glides forward, all grace and timing, offering parting cakes like blessings. Your father, ever the strategist, mentions next steps with a practiced calm. The young man bows once more. You curtsy. The fire crackles in the silence between you, then he's gone. And you're left wondering, what will he remember? The sprig of rosemary, the embroidered fox, the slightly uneven seam on your sleeve you couldn't quite fix in time. Once the guests disappear through the gate, your parents vanish into the solar, voices low, door shut. You're left stacking plates and pretending you aren't burning with curiosity. But you are. Oh, absolutely you are. Historians have uncovered correspondence between noble households where daughters are discussed like livestock. Good hips. Unlikely to cause conflict. It makes modern readers wince. And yet, not all of it is so bleak. In between the bargains and bartering, there are glimpses of genuine affection. One lord once wrote admiringly, "She has wit beneath quiet eyes." Maybe, just maybe, that was their version of poetry. That night, you lie awake, replaying everything. Did you say too little? Too much? Was your hair behaving? Should you have embroidered something more romantic? Swans, perhaps, or a pomegranate instead of a fox mid. Leap. You turn it over in your mind like beads in a rosary. Morning arrives without answers. No one speaks of what happened. The rhythm of the manor resumes. Bread to bake, chickens to clean, but everything feels strangely suspended. Then, at last, your father summons you. You climb the stairs slowly, each step sounding like a drumbeat in your chest. They're interested, he says, not bothering from the document he's drafting. You nod, waiting for more. There isn't any, at least not from him. But your mother catches your sleeve before you leave. Her voice drops to a hush. They'll be back next week, she tells you, with a proposal. You exhale, not out of joy, not quite out of dread, but something suspended in between. It's not finalized yet, but the path is clearing. The wheel is turning, and you're still figuring out how to walk without falling off the edge. The next few days fall into a rhythm of polite choreography. You're positioned again like a living display, peeling peas by the gatehouse, feeding hens just as visitors arrive, stitching under a window where your careful fingers are framed by sunlight. The product this time isn't bread or linens. It's you, positioned for viewing, for weighing, for consideration. But then it happens again. That sound, hooves on stone, saddle leather creaking, voices in the courtyard. You peek through the wooden slats and see him. No, not a boy, a young man. Climbing down from a horse. He's taller than you imagined, fumbling with the reins, and wearing a cloak far too nice for travel. That's either an excellent sign or a terrible one. Your chest flutters. Skip or hiccup, it's hard to say. He doesn't glance up at your window. He's too busy beating the dust off his boots like they personally wronged him. Scholars still debate what these early encounters actually felt like. Were they stiff as formal interviews, easygoing like shared dinners, or just painfully awkward, full of half smiles and candle shadows? You're about to find out, because, yes, he's come to meet you. Sort of. Officially, he's here to meet the household. Which, in noble matchmaking terms, means they're seriously considering what you bring to the table. Your mother rushes you into your best gown. Modest neckline. Long sleeves. Hem checked twice. No perfume, but she lets you dab rosemary on your wrists. It's sharp, understated, and just foreign enough to imply, I know herbs. Downstairs, everything's been arranged. Fire roaring despite the heat, food arranged like offerings. You're given one last rundown, no pig talk. No cousin Matilda anecdotes, and absolutely no mention of your morbid habit of collecting bird bones in the hedgerow. He arrives with his steward. He bows, too formally. Greets your father politely, then scans the room like he's mapping exits. You understand completely. When you're introduced, you drop into a practiced curtsy. Eyes lowered, posture perfect. Just enough to appear well, trained, not strange. You've rehearsed this so many times it's muscle memory. You could curtsy in your sleep. You probably have. The steward makes polite conversation with your father. Grape harvests, recent rain patterns, the kind of small talk that sounds like nothing but means everything. Meanwhile, the young man, really, you need to stop calling him. The boy takes a seat beside you on a carved bench. A servant steps forward with wine. You both accept. He sips, then clears his throat with the nervous energy of someone preparing for battle. Do you like music? He asks. You pause. This could go badly in multiple directions. Say yes, and he might start serenading you. Say no, and he might label you uninteresting. You settle on a diplomatic smile. Sometimes, he nods. You both turn your attention to a tapestry hanging nearby. St. Margaret, dramatically plunging a spear into a dragon's eye. A fitting backdrop for this strange, ceremonial encounter. This, apparently, is what passes for courtship in the 1300s. Romantic interaction before marriage is brief, supervised, and completely wrapped in family presence. If you're ever left alone, it's for 5 tightly monitored minutes in a walled garden, while a servant pretends not to listen from 10 feet away. Still, those 5 minutes could tip the scales. If you come off as too aloof, they might lose interest. Too enthusiastic, that can be interpreted as improper. It's an act of balance that would exhaust a tightrope walker. You take another sip of wine. He glances at the embroidery in your lap. What are you working on? You show him the fox you've been stitching. A sleek one, caught mid-leap. He actually smiles, and this time it feels real. It looks like it's about to jump off the cloth. It's a simple observation, but somehow it stays with you. Eventually, the steward announces it's time to go. Your mother, graceful to the end, offers farewell pastries. Your father drops a comment about next steps. The young man bows again. You curtsy. The fire crackles softly between you as he exits, leaving you wondering, what part of today will stick with him? The scent of rosemary, the fox, the imperfect seam near your elbow. Once they're gone, your parents disappear behind the closed doors of their solar. You stay behind, helping clear the table, acting like you're not hanging on every muffled word behind that wall. But you are. You care deeply. Historians have found old family letters filled with descriptions of girls that would make modern readers wince. Docile, looking, unlikely to stir trouble. But they also found fragments of something softer. Notes of real interest, even admiration. One nobleman once described a girl as having wit behind quiet eyes, as close as you get to a medieval love letter. That night, you lie awake, replaying the entire afternoon. Did you speak enough? Was your hair behaving? Was choosing a fox for your embroidery too bold? Should you have gone with something more symbolic? Swans, a pomegranate. The next day, life continues as usual. Bread is needed. Chickens are feathered. But everything feels like it's waiting. That evening, your father calls you upstairs. Each step up sounds like a drumbeat. They're interested. He says without looking up from the page he's writing. You nod. You wait for more. There isn't more later. Your mother finds you and speaks in a quiet voice. They'll return next week. With a proposal. You don't quite feel joy. You don't feel dread either. It's something more complicated. A weightless sort of pressure. Your fate isn't sealed yet, but it's definitely drawing closer. The wheels are turning, and you're still figuring out how this game is even played. The next week unfolds with the slow, sticky patience of melting wax. Time drips rather than passes. The return visit looms. This time, no pastries, no small talk. This time it's about contracts over dinner. Your mother starts dropping legal terms into the conversation, like breadcrumbs. Jointure, land rights, inheritance clauses, all between sips of pottage and bites of bread. You nod, even though half of what she says sounds like alchemy, and the other half makes your stomach do small flips. Because here's the truth: marriage in the Middle Ages didn't end with a kiss. It ended with ink, on parchment, watched by relatives, witnessed by stewards, and notarized by a man who smells like candle wax and fermented grain. The marriage contract is where the whole thing becomes official. It doesn't just list your dowry. It spells out his responsibilities, your living allowance, what happens to you if he dies, and whether you're allowed to keep living in the house afterward. Romantic, isn't it? Your father pulls out a wax tablet and begins reciting the official inventory. 3 bolts of fine linen from Flanders, a carved cedar chest, 2 silver spoons, no forks of course, since those are still viewed with deep suspicion, a pair of doves, which are supposed to be symbolic somehow, and a modest pouch of coins, stitched with your grandmother's initials. He also throws in a piece of land your mother received when she married, a little bonus to sweeten the deal. Historians note this tactic wasn't unusual. Families often pooled their best assets to upgrade their daughters' chances in the marriage market. Think of it like medieval Craigslist, but with more livestock and slightly fewer spelling errors. Word comes back from the boys' side. They'll agree to everything. Almost. They're asking for one change. They want the cedar chest and the doves. You're slightly annoyed on the birds' behalf. They didn't volunteer for this. But this is how negotiations work. Everything is a trade. Later that evening, you hear your father muttering under his breath. Too much for a second son. But he's eyeing that manor near the mill. Sure, it floods every spring, but it's still land. And in the 1300s, land is currency. It feeds you, shelters you, and, at least in theory, buys you protection from starvation and taxes. Some contracts went into surprising detail. There's one case where the bride's family insisted she not be made to work past dusk. A rare clause, possibly out of kindness, or maybe just to reduce arguments, when harvest season rolled around. As your mother folds linens, she tells you about her own wedding. She was promised at 14, married at 15, and cried for 3 straight days after meeting your father. He was shorter than I imagined, she says with a little shrug. But he could cook trout. Eventually, I appreciated that. You don't ask if she ever loved him. You're not sure that question even meant the same thing then. Marriage wasn't about romance. It was survival, partnership, family fusion. Love might show up later, or it might not. Historians still argue whether it was a goal, a bonus, or just something for bollards and bards. The day of the official proposal arrives. The manor is spotless. Candles are lit in daylight purely for effect. You're dressed in the blue gown again, now rehemmed. Your mother hums nervously while tying a ribbon in your hair. He arrives, with his father this time. You do your best not to look at him too much. But when you do, you catch something in his expression. A flash of recognition, maybe a hint of a smile, definitely nerves. The adults speak in formal tones. Vellum is unrolled. Ink is uncorked. The steward clears his throat so often you begin to worry. Then finally, the words are read aloud. By God's will and under the Church's eye, the House of Edrich proposes the union of Lord Eldwin's second son, Rodri, to the daughter of Lord Harwin of the Southern Holdings, with the following terms. It goes on for some time. You watch your own hands, suddenly too warm. You focus on breathing. Slow inhale, long exhale, like the cook taught you after the cider incident. Eventually, the speaking stops. Heads nod. Seals are pressed into warm wax. And then someone, probably your father, says, "Daughter." All eyes turn toward you. Technically, this is your chance. You could speak, protest, revise. But everyone knows that's not how it works. You rise, bow your head, and softly say, "I accept." Your voice is quieter than you meant it to be, but firm enough to carry. The tension in the room finally breaks. That night, after the guests have left and the fire has faded to glowing coals, your mother finds you in the kitchen. She presses a small cake into your hand. It's sweet, spiced, and clearly pilfered from the feast. She smiles. You did well. You want to ask if it's normal to feel a little hollow, a little nervous, maybe even a little sad. But instead, you nod and eat the cake. Because the deal is done. The signatures are dry. The doves are spoken for, and your life, from this moment forward, is no longer theoretical. In every meaningful way, you now belong to someone else. But don't expect a romantic getaway or a candlelit celebration. The actual wedding could still be months, or even years, away. The timeline depends on all sorts of variables: the harvest, the church calendar, and whether there's a priest available who isn't, say, locked up for skipping tithe payments. Still, make no mistake, you're officially engaged. And you're 12. Historians often point out that in 14th century Europe, 12 was a perfectly acceptable age for betrothal, especially for noble families, where strategy trumped sentiment. The earlier the betrothal, the sooner the alliance, while consummation was sometimes delayed, especially for younger brides. The legal and financial details were rarely postponed. In some strange way, you're considered fortunate. Some girls were matched up even younger. One noble girl in France was pledged at 6, married at 9, and reportedly spent most of her wedding feast curled under the table, more interested in candied nuts than politics. Scholars still debate whether these early marriages were symbolic placeholders or actual domestic arrangements. Either way, the girls involved had almost no voice in the matter. Back in your own household, the transformation begins. You're still a daughter, but you're being prepared, quietly but relentlessly, to become a bride. Your days now include extra embroidery practice, posture correction drills, and a steady stream of whispered advice. Don't laugh too loudly. Keep your eyes down. Always add, God willing, before any opinion that sounds remotely assertive. Your body becomes a frequent topic of conversation. Are you tall enough yet? Do your hips suggest you'll be a good mother someday? One midwife stares at you, for what feels like forever before declaring, she'll birth wide. You're not entirely sure what that means, but it doesn't sound particularly peaceful. Your diet shifts too. More dairy, more fish, fewer crusty loaves. You're given new shoes with a slight heel, designed to make you look taller. You spend whole afternoons practicing how to sit so that your waist appears more delicate. No one says it out loud, but you know exactly what's happening. You're being reshaped and praised, not for what you've learned or chosen, but for things you had no say in: the fairness of your skin, the lightness of your walk, the angle of your wrists. Meanwhile, the things you are proud of, like how you've memorized chunks of Boethius, Consolation of Philosophy, or your flawless imitation of the cook's Yorkshire drawl, are completely ignored. Then comes a gift. A brooch in the shape of a thistle sent by your fiancé, Rodri. It arrives with a short note: "It made me think of you." You're not sure whether to be flattered or mildly offended. A thistle is lovely, yes, but also prickly and famously hard to uproot. Still, it's a far better token than the taxidermied weasel your cousin once received. That engagement didn't last long. You pin the brooch to your outer tunic. Not directly over your heart, but close, and try not to glance at it every few minutes. One morning, your mother calls you into her chamber, her voice laced with something different. Laid out on the bed are 3 veils, one white, one ivory, and one so sheer you can see your palm through it. She asks which you prefer. You point to the ivory one. She nods, satisfied, as if you've passed an invisible test. She begins walking you through what comes next. The wedding traditions, the church door blessings, the banquet customs, and of course the bridal bath. Ah yes, the bath. According to custom, the bride is to be bathed in fragrant water by the trusted women of the household. It's part purification ritual, part hygiene checkpoint. You'll be scrubbed down, anointed with oils, your hair plaited with rosemary and sage. A protective charm will be sewn into your undergarments, meant to prevent infertility, or rats, or maybe both. No one's entirely sure. The bridal bath appears in many cultures, with varying degrees of pomp. Some involve whispered prayers and flickering candles. Others are purely functional wooden buckets, rough cloths, and water that smells faintly of ash. But the meaning is consistent. You are being readied, transformed. And as you stand there, listening to your mother describe each step, it hits you. This entire process is designed to help you forget who you were. Your routines, your hobbies, your sense of self, slowly washed away, replaced by ceremony, expectation, and role. Even your name may not survive the marriage intact. Depending on his preference, you might become Lady Rodri, or simply wife. These days, you find yourself wandering alone more often, especially into the orchard, where the apple blossoms are just starting to open. It's peaceful there. No lessons, no posture corrections, no curious glances from future relatives, just the soft buzz of bees, and your own thoughts drifting in the breeze. One afternoon, you borrow a small mirror from your mother's trunk and carry it out beneath the trees. You tilt it, studying your reflection as if trying to see yourself through their eyes. You try on a half smile. Adjust the brooch. On the outside, you look composed. Inside, you still feel like the girl who once stole an entire honeycomb and blamed the family dog. That night, your father casually mentions the wedding date over supper. It's been set for 2 moons from now, scheduled before the wheat ripens, so the dory can be transported with fewer complications and the feast won't interfere with any major church holidays. Of course, the church must approve, and the church always has opinions. Some priests write long, winded sermons urging brides to be obedient, humble, and chaste. Others are more pragmatic, blessing the couple's fertility and sternly reminding them to avoid consummating their marriage on high feast days. Somewhere, someone must be tracking all this on a very crowded liturgical calendar. Historians still debate how closely these ecclesiastical rules were actually followed. Many were widely known, many were just as widely ignored. A few particularly zealous bishops even tried to impose pre-wedding celibacy, with one going so far as to threaten excommunication for any groom who kissed his bride too enthusiastically at the altar. No pressure. That night, you lie awake, staring up at the beams above your bed. You count the knots in the wood. You give each one a name, familiar names, family names, then start again from the beginning. It's the only way to quiet your mind, which spins endlessly like a wheel in the wind. You're 12, engaged, waiting. You rise before dawn, not because anyone told you to, but because sleep offered only dreams you weren't ready to face. Dreams of veils and vows, of whispered Latin phrases, of Rodri looking at you, but not really seeing who you are. You slip through the sleeping manor in soft slippers, past the kitchen, where the cook is already wrestling with sticky dough, and out into the orchard. Mist still curled low around the trunks of the trees. The grass is wet, brushing cool against your feet. You stand still. You breathe. For a brief moment, you're not a daughter, not a betrothed, not a name on a contract. You're just a person awake alone in the quiet. Then a voice calls you. Not sharply, but firmly. It's your tutor. She's brought a lute today. Apparently, this morning's lesson is about the art of courtship. You sit, stiff and uncertain, while she explains the proper behaviours, how to receive a gift with poise, how to lower your gaze politely when complimented, what to do if someone writes you a poem. The answer, oddly enough, involves a staged faint, or at least pretending to be overwhelmed. This isn't love. It's choreography. In medieval society, courtship was less about emotion and more about execution. A carefully scripted performance rather than spontaneous feeling. That doesn't mean it was unkind. It could have warmth, even sweetness, but always within the strict confines of decorum. You practice smiling without revealing too many teeth, laughing without making noise, and mastering the famously lethal look away, then glance back technique, which when timed correctly is supposedly devastating. Historians often describe courtship in the 1300s as a kind of social warfare, restrained, ritualistic, strategic. Every word a weapon, every movement measured. And unless your family happened to be exceptionally progressive, time spent with your fiancé was limited, heavily supervised, and often awkward. Later that day, Rodri shows up without warning. He brings his sister and 2 wary hunting dogs with names longer than most people's full titles. You meet in the garden, beneath the wisteria. Your mother sits nearby, pretending to read a psalter. Though it's clear she's listening to every word, you exchange the standard pleasantries. He comments on the weather. You mention the blossoms. Neither of you is especially smooth. Then, unexpectedly, he reaches into his belt and pulls out a small pouch. "I brought you something," he says. Inside the pouch 2 wooden buttons, each carved like a star. You blink, surprised. "They're from my cousin's workshop," he adds quickly. She claims they're lucky, though she might have made that up to sell more. You smile, genuinely this time. "They're lovely." You reply, even though one has a tiny chip. It's not poetry. It's not a serenade under your window. But it's something real, and somehow it feels more honest than the endless talk of veils, cake orders, and that distant cousin who keeps suggesting you stitch your initials together with his. You wonder if Rodri is just as unsure, if he too is getting lessons on how to compliment you without sounding like he's listing livestock for sale. One of the dogs barks and bolts after a squirrel. The chase ends in a flurry of leaves, and you both laugh. Not because it's especially funny, but because it loosens the air between you. For a heartbeat, everything feels almost natural. He doesn't stay long, just a polite bow and a promise to return in a week. You wave gracefully, as your tutor insists, then slip back inside, the scent of onions and nervous energy trailing from the kitchen. That evening over dinner, your father casually mentions that Rodri's family has finalized the wedding date. It'll take place at midsummer. Your mother immediately launches into her planning voice. Dresses, candles, where to seat whom, how many hens must be fattened. You nod along, but your mind is elsewhere on buttons shaped like stars, on gangly hounds with impossible names, and that uncertain flicker inside you. Hope? Maybe. Small and cautious, but there. Hope, of course, must be dressed in manners and tied with a ribbon. Still, for all its stiffness, medieval courtship had its moments. Especially among families with resources, there was often this small, precious window before marriage, time for exchanging small gifts, taking short walks under watchful eyes, maybe even speaking with some honesty. That night, you retreat to your chamber and sew the buttons into a small pouch. Not your dory chest, not yet. Something quieter, something just yours. Historians still debate whether girls found joy in this stage or merely endured it. The records are scattered with poems written to betrothed boys and prayer books where girls scrawled their private worries in the margins. Some expressed excitement, others confusion. A few wrote down nothing at all. You don't writing at all, but you sit by your window, looking at the stars, and whisper into the dark, "Let him be kind." As if in answer, the breeze picks up, rustling your curtain, and for just a moment, you believe this might actually be bearable. With midsummer approaching, the manner starts to shift. At first, it's small things, extra barrels, an order of too many candles, your mother redrawing seating charts like a general preparing for war. Then it builds. Stonemasons show up to fix steps no one uses. Two tailors argue passionately about your underdress hemline as though it's scripture. And you? You're told to rest, which, as you've learned, means staying out of the way unless someone needs to rehearse floral arrangements in your hair. This is your bridal preparation, a strange waiting zone between childhood and matrimony, packed with rituals, superstitions, and more chamomile tea than is probably safe. First comes the bride's washing day. The older women of the house gather in a small chamber. Buckets of warm water are hauled in, scented with lavender, rosemary, and vinegar, for purification, or just because it's tradition. Scholars aren't sure. You're gently ushered into the steaming bath, and then scrubbed, firmly. They murmur blessings, some ancient, some invented on the spot. A red ribbon is tied around your ankle. A bay leaf is tucked behind your ear. You smell like a walking spice rack, and feel like something being prepped for roasting. But strangely, it soothes you. These women, your mother, your aunts, your old nurse, have all done this before. Some hands are worn, their faces weathered, but their eyes are soft with memory. They don't speak of fear. They don't speak of love. They talk about how to keep loaves from going stale, how to keep your husband's feet warm at night, how to live, and you sit there quietly, soaking it all in. That night, they give you a small cup of warmed wine laced with herbs, something to calm your nerves. You sip it quietly, the fire burning low in the hearth. Absent-mindedly, your fingers trace the embroidered fox stitched into your nightgown, still caught mid. Leap still yours. The next morning, the garments begin arriving. Not just the wedding dress, but the full bridal trousseau shifts, stockings, veils, girdles, even a pair of shoes so stiff and finely stitched they look spun from cobwebs. Your mother guides you through each item with the reverence of a priestess. The veil, from her own wedding. The belt, once your grandmother's. The chemise, made by your cousin, whose sewing outshines her conversation skills. Each piece carries meaning. One is for fortune, one for fertility, one for fidelity, though how a petticoat guarantees loyalty remains a mystery. Still, in medieval England and France, the trousseau was more than fabric. It was a decoration, a signal of your new role, not just bride, but future mother, keeper of a household. Some girls even packed spoons engraved with family crests, or brought their own cooking pots. Nothing says eternal union like matching cookware. Among the neat stacks of linen, you find a small bundle wrapped in cloth. A few charms, a bronze key, a smooth river stone, a bit of ribbon frayed at the edge. No one explains what they mean. You don't ask. You simply hold them. Outside, the manor shifts into celebration mode. Workers string garlands along beams. The kitchens smell of roasted duck and browning bread. The local priest pays a visit, offering the usual warnings. Humility, obedience, a lifelong avoidance of sin. He hands you a book of psalms. You smile and nod while quietly imagining tossing it into the fire. You won't, but the thought is oddly comforting. That evening, Rodri returns. This time, you're granted a short walk together through the garden. Just the two of you, plus your ever watchful nursemaid and a shaggy dog named Pickle. You wander through rows of lavender. Rodri hands you a sweet. It sticks awkwardly to his sleeve, and the two of you laugh. Not because it's hilarious, but because the laughter cuts the tension. The conversation drifts gently. He talks about a falcon his family's been training. You tell him about the donkey in your orchard that refuses to cooperate with anyone. Then, almost too casually, he asks, "Are you okay?" The simplicity of the question almost undoes you. "I think so." You say. He nods. Same. Silence follows. The breeze moves through the mint. A bird calls from the hedges. It's the most honest exchange you've shared. Historians rarely get windows into these quiet moments. Most records are filled with legal language, formal agreements, filtered letters. But every so often, there's a diary, a scribbled note in a prayer book, a drawing in a margin, proof that tenderness existed, even within all the formality. You walk back together, not touching, but in rhythm. The manor glows gold in the setting sun. You glance up at the windows. Tomorrow they'll be wrapped in flowers. Tomorrow everything changes. That night, your family gathers for supper. Your father tells a joke that actually lands. Your brother asks for more cheese. Your mother hums while slicing pears. It feels still, like time holding its breath. One last meal before you stop being only a daughter. You sleep in fresh linens. Somewhere outside, someone is still hammering. You close your eyes and offer a quiet prayer, not to a saint, but to something older and wider. Let this be enough. Let me be enough. The wedding morning begins before the light breaks. The manor moves in hushes, as though it knows this day needs to begin in silence. Your room is already glowing with candles. The air is thick with warm herbs and slow anticipation. 3 women are waiting your mother, your aunt, and the seamstress who made your gown. They greet you with soft eyes and a wooden bowl filled with warm milk and honey. No one speaks yet. Today is not for idle chatter. Today is for transformation. You are undressed gently, like a fragile relic. Your body is dusted with scented powders. Your hair is brushed, then woven into long braids wrapped with pearls. A sprig of rosemary is tied near the base. A charm for memory. Not memory of yourself, of course. Of your duty. Dressing takes time. A linen layer followed by wool, then by wool. Pale blue silk embroidered with silver vines curling across the hem. The belt bears your family's crest. The veil is pinned into your braids using gold combs shaped like doves. You can barely feel your head under the weight. And then, the shoes. Stiff, narrow, ceremonial. They're not made for comfort or distance. You slip them on with effort, like you're stepping into a new life. Which, in a way, you are. No socks. Downstairs, the hall has been completely transformed. Flowers hang from beams. Fresh rushes line the floors. A minstrel tunes his lute with great ceremony, even though no one asked him to. Outside, the sun is rising, just brushing the tops of the orchard trees. You are led to the church by procession, but not parade. This isn't a royal wedding. No trumpets or jewels or parade of fine horses. Just your family, his, and a few neighbours who were allowed to peek as long as they didn't hotch the cakes. The church ceremony begins at the door. Yes, the door. According to medieval custom in much of Western Europe, the marriage vows were often taken on the church's doorstep, visible, public, symbolic. The idea was that marriage was a contract of community concern, not just a private affair. You stand beside Rodri. He looks unusually serious, as if someone told him this was also an exam. The priest begins the ritual. Latin phrases rise and fall, barely making sense to your overwhelmed brain. You hear your name. You hear his. Then the question, do you, daughter of Howin of Westard, take this man? And you say it. I do, you don't stumble. Your voice is calm. And in that moment, brief and unspectacular, you are no longer simply yourself. You are a wife. A fine circle of metal is placed on your hand. You glance at it only once. Rodri murmurs something to you under his breath, but you don't quite catch it over the rustling of your veil. The rest is a blur, a prayer, a blessing, a sprinkle of holy water that lands in your shoe. Then feasting. Oh, the feasting. Tables sag with roasted meats, stewed fruits, and wheels of cheese tall enough to hide behind. Guests eat with their fingers and wipe them on whatever fabric is closest, including sleeves that don't belong to them. You are seated at the centre like a saint, decorative, observed, slightly overwhelmed. Rodri is beside you, quieter than expected. He occasionally passes you a piece of bread or refills your cup. You wonder if that counts as romance? There is dancing, of course. An awkward circle of guests attempting synchronized stomping while the lute player gleefully improvises. You are pulled into the dance by a cousin who spills like meat and parsley. You spin, you laugh, you nearly trip. It is in its way. Perfect. One tradition you didn't expect, the bedding toast. Near the end of the evening, a group of guests clink goblets and begin chanting rivaled songs. Nothing explicit, but enough to make your ears turn pink. It's a medieval joke meant to tease you both and signal that the wedding day is ending and the wedding night is near. Historians still debate how formal these rituals were. In some regions, the newlyweds were escorted to their chamber by singing guests. In others, the crowd went so far as to witness the couple in bed. Thankfully, yours is not one of those regions. You are led to a chamber prepared with fresh linens, candles, and a small bowl of spiced wine. Rodri follows. The door closes. You sit on the edge of the bed, fingers knotted in your lap. He stands near the hearth, uncertain. The silence stretches. He says your veil's crooked. You laugh. You weren't expecting to laugh. He reaches out tentatively and straightens it. There, he says. Better. You look at him then, not as a contract, but as a boy barely older than you, trying to navigate the strange script just as awkwardly. And in that glance, something shifts. The fire crackles. The wind brushes the shutters. And for the first time in weeks, you feel something like calm. You lie down, still in your gown, still unsure, still you. But also now someone's wife. The morning after is oddly anticlimactic. You wake not to trumpets or hushed gossip, but to bird song and the faint scent of smoke from the hearth. You're still in your gown, your braid half undone, and your fingers clutching the edge of the sheet like they've been holding on all night. Rodri is already up, standing by the window with one boot on, gazing out like he's expecting to see something meaningful. Instead, he sees a goat eating your mother's herb garden. Good morning, he says a little too formally. You sit up, smoothing your gown, your voice caught between sleep and suspicion. Morning, and that's it. You're married. There's no fanfare, no parade. Just the quiet realization that yesterday's anxiety has turned into today's reality. Later, your mother checks on you, not too obviously, and leaves a tray of warm oat cakes and berries. She says nothing. You say nothing. That's the agreement. For the next few days, everything changes and nothing does. The manor still hums with chores. You still feed the chickens, but now you do it as someone else. People glance at you differently. Servants bow a little lower. The cook suddenly starts asking your opinion on spice levels. Your new title, Lady of the House, is more ceremonial than real, at least for now. Your parents haven't left yet, and Rodri's father still controls most of the land, but the expectation has shifted. One afternoon, you're called into the solar to review the joint ledger. It's your first glimpse into what you now technically own. A few sheep, a leased orchard, and something called fish rights, which sounds like a political slogan, but is apparently quite valuable. The steward explains the basics. These ponds supply eel to the bishop's kitchens, so be careful who you lend them to. You nod as if you've always known this, as if eels were a regular part of your economic strategy. Historians note that medieval brides were expected to become competent household managers within weeks. Whether they did depended on education, personality, and whether anyone was willing to teach them. Some were micromanagers. Others delegated everything and focused on embroidery. And some, like you, stared at eel contracts and hoped for divine intervention. Meanwhile, Rodri begins taking his meals beside you. It's awkward at first. He chews too loudly. You spill soup. But there's a rhythm forming. He asks about your favourite saints. You ask about his worst childhood injury. He once fell out of a tree trying to impress a girl. It didn't work. You laugh. Then comes your first public task as a wife hosting guests. Your aunt and uncle arrive, all smiles and passive judgment. You're expected to greet them, serve wine, and maintain conversation about the harvest without once mentioning weather patterns you don't understand. You wear your nicest tunic, you speak slowly. You quote a proverb, and when your uncle says, "Ah, the new bride is clever," you smile like you've been rehearsing it your whole life. Hosting is its own battlefield. You must be charming but not forward, modest but not dull. Able to praise the roast, while discreetly managing the fact that the roast is burnt. That evening, Rodri tells you did well. You tell him he shouldn't pick at his fingernails during dinner. He laughs. You noticed. You did. You notice everything now. Medieval wives often walked a tightrope. They were symbols of virtue, agents of family reputation, and unpaid estate managers. Historians still debate how much real power they held. Some had immense influence behind the scenes. Others were quietly sidelined. The key difference? Trust and luck. A week after the wedding, your mother leaves the manor. She hugs you tight, tighter than expected, and whispers, "Don't let the steward bully you." Then she's gone, riding down the path in her familiar cloak. You watch until she disappears, and suddenly you are alone, not in the physical sense. There are servants, in laws, Rodri, but in the way that now every decision rests on you. What to serve, whom to pay, how to navigate the delicate social vines of your new life. You lie awake that night, not with fear, but with a quiet sort of readiness. The veil is folded in a chest now, the dress packed away, but the buttons Rodri gave you. You sew them onto a pouch you keep near your writing slate. Not because they're valuable, but because they remind you of something unspoken, an offering without a script. You've married into a world you didn't choose, by rules you didn't write. But you're here and you're learning. The first full moon after your wedding shines through the narrow chamber window like a coin flipped face up. You lie awake on a straw-filled mattress that cacks when you breathe too deeply, trying to calculate whether you've done anything wrong in the past 24 hours. You're certain you forgot to bless the bread before supper. Or maybe you praise the cook too enthusiastically, which your mother-in-law might interpret as flirting with the help or undermining her authority, or both. Ah, yes, the mother-in-law. She arrived 3 days after the wedding with a grim smile. 3 trunks, and the energy of a woman who once fought wolves with a ladle. You offered her lavender for her chamber. She said, "I prefer vinegar." Historians often downplay the role of in-laws in medieval households, focusing more on contracts and land rights. But surviving letters and household records suggest that women, particularly elder women, wielded subtle and sometimes not so subtle power over newlywed daughters-in-law. And yours, she's a legend. She inspects your stitching. She critiques your posture. She corrects your Latin prayers mid-sentence. You try to be gracious. You try to be invisible. You try on one memorable occasion to offer her a dried fig only to be told, "Figs soften the bowels. I prefer fortitude." You smile, nod, and eat 2 figs out of spite the moment she leaves the room. Rodri, to his credit, tries to soften the edges. He cracks a joke here, redirects a conversation there. You're beginning to realize he's not just quiet, he's careful. And in a household of sharp tongues and sharper expectations, that's its own kind of strength. Still, the adjustment is rough. You are now in charge of things no one warned you about. Managing milk rotations in the pantry, calculating grain allowances, deciding whether the weaver's apprentice deserves another month of pay despite consistently dyeing things the wrong colour. Each task feels like a riddle. Why is the owl flat? What happened to the missing candlesticks? Who left the goat and tethered again? You wish you could just go back to the orchard. But every decision you make, every order you give, or don't give, ripples outward. The household watches. Servants whisper. Your authority is like a new pair of boots, stiff, uncomfortable, but necessary. You learn quickly. Or rather, you have to. You start keeping a small book in the corner of your chest, jotting things down when no one's watching. What time the bread rises best. Which servant is laid most often. How many eggs the hens laid before the storm. One day you catch your mother-in-law reading your notes. She closes the book slowly and says, "H, not entirely foolish." It is quite possibly the highest praise you'll ever get from her. And slowly, day by day, you begin to carve out a space that feels like yours. You take over the morning planning with the steward, insisting politely, but firmly that the orchard is not to be used for goat grazing. Thank you very much. You design a new layout for the storage chest that avoids having the cheese rot next to the salt fish. You reorganize the prayer alcove and light candles, not just for saints, but for yourself. A quiet sort of rebellion. Rodri notices. He mentions overboiled turnips that the house runs smoother lately. You nod. You don't need thanks, but you don't mind hearing it either. At church, a woman asks whether you'll be joining the midwives' guild this winter. You don't know what to say. You don't feel ready. But the question stays with you. Historians still debate how much public agency women had in the 1300s. Some towns had formal guilds. Others operated under unwritten rules with women running whole sections of the local economy from behind shutters and beside ovens. What you do know is this. Women notice other women, and they're watching you now. One evening you light a candle for Saint Denis. Not because she's the patron saint of mental illness, though that fits, but because you once liked the way her name sounded in a story. You sit by the hearth. You listen to the wood crackle. The door opens. Rodri enters. Tired from walking the fields, he drops into the chair beside you, pulls off his boots, and sigh. You offer him a slice of dried apple. He takes it. He doesn't thank you, but he chews slowly, thoughtfully. And in that silence, in that tiny exchange of dried fruit and shared firelight, you realize this life might not be yours by choice, but it is yours by presence. You are here, and you're beginning to fit. It's been nearly a month since the wedding, and the novelty of your new title has faded like embroidery left too long in the sun. People no longer say the bride when you enter a room. Now it's just my lady, followed by requests to approve chicken feed purchases, settle disputes over who broke the butter churn, or resolve whether the chapel's floor should be swept clockwise or counterclockwise. This is your life now. Gentle authority, endless logistics, and more conversations about cheese storage than you ever imagined possible. But today, something unusual happens. You receive a letter. It's small, folded neatly, sealed with a smudge of red wax in the shape of a tulip. You don't recognize the hand. You open it slowly, cautiously. It's from a girl you once knew, a distant cousin now married in the north. Her handwriting wobbles, but the tone is unmistakable. Curiosity, nostalgia, warning. She writes of her marriage. He's kind, quiet. He likes turnips more than a man should. She writes of childbirth. No one told me how much screaming there would be. The cows were alarmed. She ends simply, as it's strange that I miss myself. You read the last line twice, 3 times. It sits in your lap like a stone. You tuck the letter into your gown and walk to the orchard, as you often do when you need air, not laced with flour or firewood. The trees are blooming again, blossoms thick and white, falling in soft spirals like slow-motion snow. You press your back to a trunk and stare upward. You do miss something. You're not sure if it's the version of yourself who believed in embroidered foxes and long afternoons, or if it's someone you never got to be. Historians often struggle to capture the internal world of medieval women, especially noble women whose lives were documented through land transfers and childbearing records, not diaries. But here in your quiet orchard, you feel certain that many of them stood exactly where you are, thinking the same thing. Where did I go? The next day, your monthly bleeding begins. The entire household notices before you do. Your maids scour your laundry with unusual focus. Your mother-in-law begins preparing an herbal tonic, and the steward mysteriously drops hints about adding another chamber to the north wing. You, however, are ambivalent. In medieval society, fertility is both a virtue and a curse. A wife's primary duty, so the church says, is to bear children, preferably sons. Many sons, enough to run the estate, and still have spares for accidents involving horses, hunting, or unfortunate fencing lessons. But you are barely 13. The thought of being a mother feels as abstract and impossible as flying to the moon. And yet the expectations press in. Rodri doesn't mention it, though you suspect he knows. He is at the very least aware of your frequent visits to the herb woman's hut, and the increased number of apples you're told to eat each morning. You overhear your aunt advising your mother-in-law. Give her rue if she seems sickly, but not too much. Remember, poor Cecily. You don't ask who Cecily was. In private, your nursemaid gives you a bundle of dried flowers tied in red thread. For balance, she says, you don't ask what kind. You just place it under your pillow and hope for peaceful dreams. That night, Rodri asks if you're feeling unwell. You nod, grateful for his vagueness. He doesn't press. Instead, he offers you a small glass of warmed wine and says, I never know what to say about these things. You laugh quietly. Neither do I. And in that pause, that mutual lack of understanding, something gentle blooms. You aren't lovers. Not yet. Maybe not ever in the way stories describe. But you are becoming allies. And in a world like this, that might matter more. Later that week, you attend your first childing feast, a gathering to celebrate a local woman's successful delivery. The room smells of honey cakes and sweat. The new mother lies propped up on cushions, pale but triumphant, while women pass around the baby and murmur things like strong lungs and broad feet. You hold the infant when it's your turn. It's small, wrinkled, surprisingly heavy. You hand it back quickly and eat 3 honey cakes in quick succession. No one notices. As the sun dips behind the chapel roof, you walk home with your thoughts tied in knots. You wonder if you'll survive childbirth, if you'll even make it that far. You wonder how your cousin fared in the north. You wonder if missing yourself is a thing that fades or if it just deepens with time. The orchard is quiet when you return. You sit beneath the same tree, pluck a blossom from your lap, and press it between 2 pages of your household ledger. You write beneath it, "Today, I was unsure, but the world continued anyway." You close the book and breathe. Another season slips by. The apples have ripened in the orchard, swollen and red, and a low golden light slants across the floor of the hall each afternoon, thick with dust and the scent of old rushes. You still wake early. Now, out of habit more than duty, Rodri takes his tea in the garden. Your mother-in-law has stopped inspecting your embroidery quite so often. You've even learned to make peace with the steward, provided he's given cheese on Thursdays. In short, you've survived. But today, the priest visits, which always means one of 2 things. Someone's dead or someone's about to be told how to live. It's neither. He wants to advise you, he says with that strange smile priests wear when they're about to discuss delicate matters. He sits stiffly, lays a scroll on the table, and clears his throat. The roles of a wife, he begins, are as manifold as the gifts of the Holy Spirit. You resist the urge to make a face. What follows is an awkward, droning sermon about obedience, humility, and joyful service. You're fairly sure he made up half the references. There's something about always keeping your husband's feet warm, and something else about never speaking during thunder, because it invites demons. You nod politely. You pretend to take notes. You offer him cider, and thank him for his wisdom. But inside you're listing all the things the church has no clue about. Like how to tell when Rodri's in a mood. He plays with his ring. Or how to calm the maid who's been crying in the pantry. Leave her alone, then offer cheese. Or how to tell your mother-in-law you disagree without actually saying it. Start with a compliment. End with a question. You have your own gospel now. Still, you attend Mass regularly. You sit near the front. You bow at the right times. Not because you believe in every line of doctrine, but because you've learned that being visibly virtuous gives you more room to maneuver. Historians still debate how devout most medieval women really were. Religious texts were full of ideals. Chastity, silence, obedience, but surviving letters, confessions, and even graffiti suggest that most women practiced a kind of practical piety. Enough to stay out of trouble, enough to earn favour, but not so much that they forgot to live. After the priest leaves, you return to your chamber and light a candle. Not to St. Margaret or Catherine, but to yourself, just for a moment. You whisper nothing. You just breathe. That evening, you and Rodri share supper and quiet companionship. There's stew, bread, and a bit of apple wine. He tells you a story about a neighbour who tried to dye his sheep purple for a festival. It didn't end well. You laugh harder than expected. It feels good. And then cautiously you ask, "Do you ever miss being just you?" He looks at you, fork halfway to his mouth. All the time. There's a pause, then without much fanfare he adds, "But I think I'm becoming someone better now." You sit with that for a moment, letting it settle like flour in a basin. Becoming someone better, not despite marriage, not because of it, but alongside it. Later, while tidying the pantry, you find your old fox embroidery. The thread's faded, but the leaf is still midair. You tuck it into your ledger. That night, you dream of nothing. No saints, no sermons, no screaming babies, just the orchard and quiet. The first frost arrives with a brittle hush. The orchard trees turn skeletal overnight, leaves scattered like coins across the garden paths. You wake to breath-clouded windows and a manor that cacks in its joints like an old man rising from bed. Winter in a medieval household is its own kind of ceremony, one of survival. The pace slows, but the stakes rise. Everything must be preserved, rationed, and tended with care. There are root vegetables to be buried in straw, blankets to be mended, candles to be counted, and chickens to be gently encouraged not to freeze solid. You are busier than ever. The servants look to you now not with politeness, but expectation. You assign firewood. You audit cheese. You oversee the salting of meats with the sternness of a cathedral treasurer. Even your mother-in-law has stepped back a little. You catch her nodding at you one morning when she thinks you're not looking. She still criticizes your posture, but now it sounds more like a habit than a judgment. And then in the quietest moment of the coldest morning yet, something new happens. You feel strange, not sick, not tired, just different. You try to dismiss it. You have too much to do. There are dried apples to sort. The steward wants to know why someone's been sneaking honey from the stores. But the feeling persists. It's not until your maid asks carefully if your monthly bleeding has come that you realize it hasn't. You count the days twice. You do the math. You check the ledger where you discreetly mark these things like a merchant tracking debts. You are late. You don't panic. You don't celebrate. You simply stare at the hearth, watching embers shift like the sky before a storm. You tell no one. Not yet. Instead, you walk the orchard. Yes, even in the frost, letting your breath rise like incense. Historians debate when exactly medieval women confirmed they were pregnant. There were no tests. Of course, only symptoms, instincts, and folk signs. Some claimed a mother could tell from the way she dreamed. Others swore by dangling rings over the belly, but most, like you, waited in silence. Waiting is a strange state. It feels like walking through a room where everyone's talking about you, but no one's using your name. Rodri notices you're quieter than usual. He asks if the fire's too warm, if the food's too salty, if the priest offended you again. You just shake your head and say, "I'm thinking." He accepts that. He's learned by now not to press. The days shorten. The kitchen grows warm and clattering. You order more blankets. You approve the construction of a new pigeon coop. You listen to a dispute about whose dog is sleeping in the grain. And all the while, you carry your secret like a stone under your tongue. Then one morning, just before matins, you feel it. A wave of nausea, so sharp it robs the colour from your cheeks. You excuse yourself? You sit on the edge of your bed. You do not cry. Instead, you say the words aloud for the first time to no one but yourself. "I think I'm with child." The confirmation comes slowly. Your nursemaid says nothing, just brings you broth more often. Your mother-in-law with eerie precision begins sending more rosemary to your chamber. Rodri, after a long silence one evening, gently places his hand on yours and says, "I won't pretend to understand, but I hope it's not too terrible. That somehow is enough." The announcement is made at the church 2 weeks later. Bells are rung. The steward orders more cloth. The kitchen prepares a celebratory pie. You spend most of the day in bed, not with sickness, but with stillness, because this is the next chapter, and it will not wait. Pregnancy in the 1300s was both blessing and terror. Mothers were revered and essential, but childbirth was dangerous. Mortality was high, pain was guaranteed. And yet, life moved forward, and women moved with it, preparing swaddles, whispering prayers, drinking herb brews that tasted like sadness. You try not to think too far ahead. Instead, you sit by the fire wrapped in wool, and stitch a fox onto a small scrap of cloth. Still leaping, still midair, the snow comes in thick swirls now, blanketing the orchard and softening even the loudest footsteps. The manor is hushed, heavy with anticipation, and the scent of tallow and woods. You are 6 moons into your pregnancy, and the weight of it presses against every part of you, your ribs, your hips, your thoughts. Each morning, the midwife arrives with her bag of pungent herbs and quiet certainty. She presses your belly, listens with her ear against your skin, and declares, "Strong heartbeat, likely a boy." You nod, though you know it could just as easily be a girl with an assertive foot. The whole household revolves around you now. Every cough you make is discussed, every craving accommodated. When you asked for stewed pears with cheese, someone fetched them within minutes. When you asked for silence, the steward tiptoed for an entire day. And yet, for all this attention, you've never felt more alone. Because no one, not even Rodri, can carry this with you. He tries, he's gentle, he's patient. He reads aloud sometimes in the evenings, stumbling over Latin declinians and laughing at his own mistakes. He rubs your back when it aches. He asks how you're feeling without pressing too hard. You appreciate all of it, but there's a distance still a veil. You are becoming something new, and no one, not even the midwife, can tell you what it will cost. Historians still argue how much choice women had in childbirth. Some assert they were passive recipients of knowledge. Others, more convincingly, show that experienced women, mothers, midwives, herbalists, passed down wisdom in quiet, deliberate ways. They shared secrets, techniques, songs. Your nursemaid begins humming when she bathes your feet. Low rhythmic sounds that calm you more than any prayer. Your aunt tells you stories about her own labour. How she screamed so loudly the dog fled into the woods and didn't come back for 3 days. She laughs, but her eyes mist over. You begin preparing the birthing chamber. It's the same room you were married in. The same room you first slept in as a bride. Now it smells of lavender, warm oil, and something sharp underneath. Maybe fear. Cloths are folded. Buckets are filled. The cradle is placed near the fire, lined with wool, and a small pillow you embroidered weeks ago in secret. A fox curled into a circle. You begin talking to the baby sometimes, just quietly, just when you're alone. You tell it what the orchard looks like in spring. You describe your favourite kind of bread, crusty, not soft. You say that you're scared, but also curious. And then one morning, it begins. It's not like in the stories. No dramatic gasp, no flood of people rushing about, just a slow, insistent ache, a rhythm building inside you, like distant thunder rolling closer. The midwife appears with terrifying calm. She nods. It's time. What follows is pain. Waves of it. You grip Rodri's hand until he forgets to breathe. You scream. You pray. You forget every line of scripture you've ever learned. Hours pass or days. Time stretches into something meaningless. At some point, someone wipes your brow and says, "Just one more." You don't believe them. But they were right. There is a cry not yours. A sharp, startling sound like a bird startled from a tree. Then another. And suddenly stillness. You're exhausted. You're shaking, but you're alive. And then placed gently in your arms is a child. Red, wrinkled, heavy with life. You look down. You blink. You wait for the feeling to arrive. The one they promised, the rush of love. But instead, there is something quieter. Recognition. As if you've known this face, this wait, this moment forever. Like it was always waiting for you. "It's a girl," the midwife says softly. Rodri exhales beside you, relieved, amazed, already smitten. You glance at him, unsure what you'll see, but he smiles. She's strong, like her mother. The room fills with soft voices. Praise. Blessings, the steward hurrying off to ring the chapel bell. You hold the child close and whisper, "I missed you." Not because you knew her, but because something in you has been missing quietly all this time. You sleep finally, wrapped in blankets and silence. The fire burns low. The orchard waits beneath its snowy shell. You dream of spring. And now, as the candles gutter low and the fire dwindles to its last amber glow, you lie still beneath a thick wool blanket, the newborn pressed gently to your side. Her breath is slow, steady, and warm against your skin, anchoring you in a moment that feels somehow outside of time. The manor is quiet now. Outside, snow settles on every rooftop and fence post. The wind, once sharp, has softened to a lullaby in the rafters. You hear no footsteps, no chores, no whispers of expectation, just the hush of winter and the slow return of your breath to its own rhythm. You are no longer the girl with the embroidered fox, no longer just a bride or a daughter. You are something else now, something fuller, softer, stronger, and as sleep begins to reach for you, you feel it. Not because all is certain, not because fear is gone, but because you've made it here to this night, to this cradle, to this quiet. And that for now is enough. So let the world outside keep spinning. Let the orchard sleep beneath its frost. Let tomorrow arrive when it's ready. Tonight you rest,